Yes, guys, what we're going to cover in this podcast today is me getting into the best shape I'd been in, then transitioning into me working in gyms. I was made redundant in that first year of the gyms due to COVID, how I managed to respond to this, some of the things that I went through in COVID, and I just want to run through some of the lessons that I managed to learn in that time frame. So, start of 2020, I just trained and became a PT. I was in very good shape at this point. I would say that was my peak shape that I'd been in my entire life at that point. And what happened was I went to start working in a gym in January 2020. So I was 20 years old at this point. First job in the gym, first 3 months went brilliant. COVID started to roll around. Everyone was like, oh, COVID's going on. We weren't quite sure what was going to happen at that point, but we continued working through it. So we continued working for about 3 weeks through March. Get to the end of March, get told that gyms are closing down, which was going to be a big hit. I was still quite optimistic at this point. I thought, maybe this will happen for a few months. Maybe gyms will open again. This will all blow over. And it became very apparent that that wasn't going to be the case, that things were going to go drastically downhill. This was my new career I just moved into. I was an accountant. I was trained level 2 and level 3 as an accountant, and I had a career in that. I left that for PT. I went away from 2018 to 2020 to train to become a PT. I just got my job, and then that was all taken away from me. I found out at the end of March that I was being made redundant, came towards payday in March, and the guy who ran the business we worked for decided not to pay us, decided to go completely off the grid, wasn't speaking to any of us, and he just decided he wasn't going to pay us for an entire month that we'd work. So I was basically broke at this point. I had no job. I was in very good condition going in towards lockdown. But you can imagine what was going through my brain. Going in towards that phase of my life, I'm thinking, have I made the right call here? Have I made the right decision going into PT? Is this just, a dream I had? Because when I went from accountancy to PT, I had many people who had my best interests at heart, but were questioning it and saying, Matt, is this the right thing for you? Are you sure you want to do PT rather than accountancy? Because, in 2020, when I was made redundant, if I was an accountant, I still would have been able to do that. So it was a big hit for me mentally because I was having these stories go through my brain of like, Matt, have you made the right choice here? Have you made the right decision for your career? And there was actually a time in lockdown COVID when I called my old boss back from the accountancy place and said to him, look, mate, can I have my job back? And I was actually going to go back there. And fortunately, he told me, Matt, there's not a space for you here, which looking back was brilliant because it's allowed me to go and have the career that I've had. But if he'd said to me, Matt, yeah, we'll let you come back, then who knows? I may have gone back and become an accountant again at that point. So all that happened through COVID was I started losing weight. I didn't really have an appetite. I was training for the first couple of months through COVID. I had just rubbish equipment, to be honest. We had some homemade dumbbells and homemade barbells in the back garden from like washing up liquid over a bar because I couldn't really afford to buy the equipment. If you were there back in COVID, you'd understand that dumbbells went from like 30, £40 up to like £200 because everyone wanted them. So I couldn't afford the equipment I needed to train. And I lost a lot of weight. I started there, I want to say, I can't remember the exact figure, but I was somewhere probably about 77, 78 kg going into lockdown. I went all the way down to 69 kilos through lockdown. So I lost, over 7, 8 kilos, which is well over a stone that I lost in lockdown. And obviously, it's good that I didn't gain tons of body fat, but I did lose quite a lot of muscle through lockdown. There's something that I can look at there is like, right, if you're going to go through a phase of less training, although I wanted to get lean, like I was like, right, okay, cool, I'm going to get lean, I'm going to get in good condition. And yeah, I got lean. I wasn't overweight, I was still in decent shape, but I did lose quite a bit of progress because I wasn't lifting heavy weights, because I wasn't training to failure. It meant that I was losing muscle. That's the one key component to maintaining muscle, is making sure, obviously, nutrition's there, you're not in too big of a deficit, but you don't want too much volume whilst you're in that cutting phase, because you don't need as much volume to maintain muscle as you do to build muscle, but you need more volume than what I had. I was training with dumbbells 2 times a week at home, not very intense, wasn't training to failure. So obviously I lost quite a significant amount of muscle mass through that time frame. And I was going through that cycle for quite a long time, questioning, is this the right career for me? So everything started to change in 2021. Gyms were reopening again. And I just decided to say, fuck it. I trained at David Lloyd's for a lot of my life. And I just went on their website. I was like, you know what? I'm going to apply to every single David Lloyd's that's within my local area. And I got a job interview for one that was an hour away. So I live in Solihull. This was up in Dudley. So, I mean, it takes an hour in rush hour traffic, 45 minutes without it. But I wanted to get my hands on anything I could. I wanted to get my foot in the door. I didn't get a job as a PT straight away. I got a job as a fitness trainer. So I was, for example, cleaning bikes in the gym. I was cleaning treadmills. I was going around making sure, doing head counts in the gym. Because obviously in COVID, they were very much so on the sanitization side. So I was very much so at the bottom of the ladder in the gym at that point. But for me, that was like a dream, actually having a job in there, being in a gym environment. It felt like I'd woke up to everything. The guy who ran the gym there basically was my mentor at that point, and he was the guy who really turned things around for me, took me under my wing. And this was a real big turning point for me, having someone like that in my life. I never really had anyone in my life. I never had like a male figure to lead the way for me. And having someone like that I could see had my best interests at heart was the one key difference for me actually progressing up the ladder. So within the space of 2 months, I'd started taking gym inductions. I climbed up to the next level, and I made it as a PT within the space of a couple of months there. And this was unbelievable. As I was progressing through that, I was actually starting to back myself. I always knew I had the tools to become a PT. I always knew I had the ability to do it, but it was the confidence, because the minute you step into a gym environment, suddenly you've got to have a lot of people skills as well. The side people don't see to personal training is the fact that you physically have to go up to someone you've never spoke to before. You have to make them feel comfortable in themselves, and you have to get them to trust you to even do like a free session with you. And then through the free session, you've got to get them to think, right, okay, cool, this is someone I want to invest my money in. And at that point in time, being a 22-year-old lad back in 2021, it wasn't a very easy thing for me to do, but I managed to do it. And the way I managed to do it was just from giving consistent value to people. And the number one thing was showing that I gave a shit about them. I would go up and ask people what their names were. I would go up and ask people about their families, what they were doing in the gym. And I would just give them advice. Before you knew it, people were booking in for sessions with me. And before you knew it, my PT calendar was completely full. Now, again, as you progress, I always say the more you progress in life, the more problems that you start to face. So I was going there 6 days per week. I was training 6 days per week there, and I didn't really have a social life outside of it at that point. So I was 22 years old, and my sole focus at that point wasn't anything whatsoever to do with relationships, wasn't to do with family, wasn't to do with friends, and it was just strictly on my business at that point of my life. So yeah, I was progressing, I was going forwards, I was starting to fill my PT diary, but I wasn't feeling satisfied, and it was like I was becoming this trainer that I'd always wanted to become. But inside me, I knew something was wrong. I physically didn't have the time to spend with family. I was very burnt out. I was traveling an hour there in rush hour and traveling back an hour. So I'd leave my house at like 7 in the morning. I wouldn't get home till 6, 7 p.m. I would work all day. I would train whilst I was there. Because as a PT, you don't just work back to back to back hours. You can have a session at 7, 10, 2 p.m. So it's not a case of I could just go home in between my sessions. I physically had to be there for the entire day. So I would wake up at 6 in the morning, I get back at 6, 7 p.m., feel absolutely knackered. I'd then go to sleep, I'd do the same thing. And that was literally my life for 6 months. At this point, I was thinking there's got to be a better life for me out there. I knew about online coaching, and I didn't take the plunge because I didn't back myself. But what you can start seeing here is that I actually started backing myself in 2021 when I went to David Lloyd's, and that's how I climbed the ladder there. But again, I didn't back myself to get to the next level of online. I didn't back myself to jump in front of cameras and speak to the camera like I'm doing today. And if I'm to look back at that, the thing that I should have done is just gone out my comfort zone even more and just backed myself and invested in another mentor. Like the mentor in the gym was brilliant, and he showed me how to PT. He showed me how to climb the ladder there. He showed me how to have the job that I wanted to have there. But what I should have really done at that point is gone and got more support and invested into a mentor. And we'll speak about this. I invested into my first mentor for online coaching in 2022 September, and we're talking about kind of midway through the year in 2021. So we can see how a year of procrastination about me knowing halfway through this year it was the right thing, and I knew online coaching was the right thing, but I procrastinated 15 months about actually doing that. That's why I really resonate whenever I see a lad I speak to on Instagram DMs and I see him procrastinating. I can see it straight in front of me, and that's the reason that I call people out. Is I say, look, bro, I can see you're exactly where I was. Let me help you. Let me just give you some advice here, because you're sabotaging, you're procrastinating. And the reason that I procrastinated in that moment, I was waiting for the perfect conditions. I wasn't actually that confident in my physique back in 2021. I'd lost quite a bit of muscle through lockdown. I'd seen my physique regress for quite a significant period, and I didn't feel like I was that big or filling out my sleeves. I thought I was a good PT because I actually just understood people and I knew how to get in shape, but I didn't feel that confident within myself at that point. So because things didn't feel perfect, I procrastinated, and I've seen that happen a lot in my life. And I've become very good the last 2 to 3 years at not procrastinating because things don't feel perfect. And I'm just an action taker now. I always say yes. I don't say yes to every opportunity, but things that I know take me closer to my mission. Like I have a very clear mission in front of me now. If it takes me closer there, I always say yes to it as long as it aligns with kind of my life and it doesn't burn me out and take me away from my mission. I'll always say yes to it now. But back then, I wouldn't do it. If things didn't feel perfect for my life, I would procrastinate about them and procrastinate and wait for things to get perfect when in reality, the perfect time will never happen. And this cycle went on all the way from March 2021 all the way up to December. I was extremely burnt out in December 2021 and I had to leave the career of PT at David Lloyd's because it was, to be honest, with you just absolutely draining my energy. It was draining my life. I had no social life anymore. I couldn't go out with my friends. I couldn't have time to see my family. I didn't feel satisfied. I wasn't earning that much money for what it was worth. So I had to leave there and hand my notice in. And I didn't have another job lined up. I just said, right, okay, 30-day notice, 1st of January 2022. I'm going to go out there and find my new career. Started applying to other gyms in my local area, managed to get a job at a Bannatyne gym in January 2022. I started working there at the end of that month. And I remember before I went there, I actually went on a trip to the Caribbean with my family in January 2022. And I was starting to try and follow people on Instagram so I could get some traction, do some online coaching. And it was always this pipe dream in the back of my mind that I wanted to do online coaching. I wanted to help people online, but I had no clue how to do it. And you can see that was January 2022. I didn't reach out to a mentor until September 2022. So you can see another 8 months of procrastination that I had there because I had the dream. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to take the next step. I somewhat knew what I needed to do. I needed to go and follow people. I needed to give advice, but I didn't have the confidence. So what I really needed to do was back myself, put my back against the wall, invest money into myself, and get a mentor to teach me the way. And I waited until September to do that. And when I did it, we'll come on to it, we've managed to create what I've created today. So I went to Bannatyne, started creating a really good life there. I actually worked at Bannatyne from January 22 to September 2023. So 18 months I actually spent there. So did really serve me very well. Built a lot of confidence. I was a PT there. I was a fitness coach. I was teaching classes. And all around, it was a very good environment for me to be in because it was very close to home. It was a 5 minute drive away from me. So I could easily get there. I could easily come back. And the minute I got to the end of summer there, I physically remember I went to Magaluf in summer 2022. And I got there and I was like, I've got a good life at Bannatyne. I'm PT and I'm close to home. But again, I'm starting to say to myself, my brain, I know I should be doing more and I'm procrastinating here. And I remember going out to Magaluf, getting very drunk for 6 days straight. And I just felt like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm wasting away my entire life here by procrastinating and waiting for the perfect moment. So that was in July 2022. And what I then decided to do was wait another 2 months again to go and make the decision. So I went away to Spain. I went away with my family in September and I was in the pool and I was just having this like kind of visualization of what things could be like. I remember looking at a mentor on Instagram and I started messaging him. I was very hesitant to join him. I said to him, look, mate, I want to coach people online. I don't want to do this full time. I want to have PT be there and I want to help people just for impact on the side. If I could help 10 people on the side, that would be incredible. That was my pipeline dream. I never even thought about becoming a full-time online coach. I always just said to myself, right, okay, cool. I'm going to have 10 online clients and I'm going to have 20 to 30 in-person clients and I'm going to live a very fulfilled and satisfied life. So to see the fact that it's come to me now coaching over kind of 40 clients at times online, even more of that when I've coached other coaches, up to 100 clients that we've coached at once. Currently we're coaching just up towards 40 people. And to say that my dream in the first place 3 years ago was to coach 10 people online, you can see the trajectory, but it could have been so much better than it currently is if I just taken action sooner. I could be 18 months ahead of where I am. So to anyone who's on the verge of that big decision in their life and you're waiting for the perfect moment, my advice to you is just fucking take action, put your back against the wall and take a massive risk on yourself. And obviously take that advice however you want to take that advice. If you don't feel like you want to take a risk on yourself, don't go and take the risk on yourself. But if you genuinely back yourself, you're extremely good at what you do. You just feel like you're waiting for the perfect moment, but you know for a fact that what's in front of you with the right surroundings, the right tools, the right mentors, the right backing, that you're going to crush it, or you're at least going to give it a good crack of the whip. Because realistically, I went and invested in that mentor in September 2022. What was the worst case scenario? I had nothing to lose. I invested 6 grand to go and join him. But what was the worst case scenario to me doing that? I'd lose 6 grand, but I would go and try and fulfill my dream, you know? And I definitely would at least pick up a couple of clients. I'd learn a lot about it. So that's the downside. And the upside is I create my dream life. So that's what you've got to ask yourself is if you're on the verge of a big decision, what do I actually lose by giving this a go? Is it a little bit of money that I can remake anyway, but I'm going to go and follow my dreams off the back of that? And that's something that I should have asked myself way, way sooner, looking back at it. So I decided to take the plunge. I was actually very hesitant to join him. I said, I'm only going to join if, you're going to give me my money back if I don't get to a certain point. He said, yeah, that's no problem. I started doing it, and yeah, things just massively went up from there. I can't lie, the first kind of few months, I didn't expect it. I got up to 5 clients online within the space of the first few months. And then all the way up to kind of Christmas, I kind of plateaued quite a significant amount. I reached 9 clients, then dropped back to 6. I reached 9 clients, dropped back to 6. Remember, I went to Amsterdam in December 2022. I come back and a load of my clients had just suddenly dropped off. And I'm like, I'm actually good enough. Is this the right thing for me? Start questioning myself, questioning my tools, questioning my mentor. And then January 2023 rolled around. So I remember waking up on New Year's Day. It's the first year that I didn't go out New Year's Eve and go out and have a drink. So that since then, I've done 3 years in a row not going out New Year's. I think New Year's is massively overrated, if I'm going to be honest. I like Christmas, but for me, New Year's Day is a day to get ahead of everyone. Everyone else is hungover on New Year's Day. I'm fresh. I get to sleep at 9, 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve. I wake up New Year's Day and I just crack straight into my work, and I'm ahead of the game. And that's what I've done now for a long time. But I remember waking up on that New Year's Day in 2023, and I just felt at one of the lowest points I've been in my life. And at this point, I had a good job, I had a certain amount of online coaching clients, and I felt genuinely one of the lowest that I've ever been. And it was because I didn't believe in myself. I'd stopped backing myself, I'd seen people leave me, and I started to have this syndrome of rejection. And whenever people have rejected me in my life, it's really impacted me mentally. And that's what I started to see was I wasn't looking at what I had. I was focusing on the people who'd left me. And I started taking it as a personal insult at the start of 2023 when people were leaving me. So I was on the verge of quitting online coaching. I thought to myself, is this worth the extra hassle and stress that it's bringing me? And you can see there's been so many points that I almost quit and threw the towel at. I called my accountant boss back in 2020 to go and get my job back. At the start of 2023, I almost threw the towel in. I procrastinated for 18 months about actually starting online coaching. So there's so many moments that could have completely ruined my progress, but there was always this inner belief of myself despite the limiting beliefs, because the limiting beliefs is just my subconscious brain saying, Matt, are you sure this is the right thing? Trying to protect me, trying to take me towards my comfort zone. But in reality, I knew deep down I had this faith in myself and this vision in myself that I was going to make it. So fast forward a couple of weeks beyond there, it's kind of mid-January 2023. I'd been speaking to a guy called George on Instagram, and I decided to reach out to him and book a consultation call. We were actually going to an event together, which was the event the mentor was holding. And I almost didn't go to this event. Because I was obviously quite in a low place at this point. I was looking for, more support here. I almost didn't go. Remember the night before I was thinking about cancelling it. I already had my train booked. And I think the only reason that I went was I'd booked a train for like 70 odd quid. And to me back then, that was quite a bit of money. And that was the only reason that I went was because I already had it booked. So I'm glad I did book it. But yeah, I remember the night before I was thinking, I might just not go. I might just throw the towel in and just quit online coaching. And yeah, I was very on the fence. It was very 50-50 whether I was going to go to that event. I remember going to the event and seeing George there. And I suddenly just felt like I actually had a vision again. I felt like I had someone in my corner because I was working in this mentorship and it was good. They were giving me tools, they were supporting me, but they weren't supporting me enough. It wasn't one-to-one enough. It didn't feel like the plan was tailored to me. It felt like it was more so they were asking me just to grow to a certain revenue target. And for me, I've never been focused on the number of money I've been earning. As you'll see, I was never really happy, even when money was going up. I was more so looking for my dream life and helping other people create their dream lives. And when I met George, he was very similar to me. He was very much so about impact. And he just said to me, look, Matt, we're going to change your life here. So then we committed to going into a photo shoot prep. He said to me, look, Matt, we're going to get you in the shape of your life. You're in good shape now. You've been training for a long time, but we're going to get you in the shape of your life and we're going to push you out your comfort zone. And having what I would say is accountability, having someone to give you a vision, a roadmap, having someone in your corner who you deeply don't want to disappoint. If you can combine that and get all them things together, you're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And that's exactly what me and George created, was a force to be reckoned with. Over the next few years, I'd go on to work with George. We'd go on to change hundreds of people's lives together. And that all came off the back of me being in a very, painful, a very dark place. And when I look back at it, someone coming into my life like that, a mentor, I look back at 2021 in the gym when a mentor came in my life. I look back at when I started my online coaching in September 22, a mentor coming into my life. and even January 23, George coming into my life as a mentor as well, I look at them as significant moments. And now I always see currency as not the money in my bank, but the people I surround myself with. If I've got good people in my life that I can call on, and I'm on my mission, I'm seeing my family, I'm changing people's lives, I'm happy. A number doesn't define my happiness. That's why I say to guys, like, don't let scales define your happiness. Don't let the number in your bank define your happiness. Of course, you need money to support your family, but as long as you're on mission, as long as you're waking up each day and you're saying, I'm giving 100% to this process out in front of me, that is all that realistically matters. Now, if we're speaking about this prep, what the rest of this podcast is going to be, I'm going to speak about the prep up to my photo shoot, and then we'll end the podcast there. But I want to speak about kind of the limiting beliefs that face me, because I joined George. We had a very good opening month. I was losing a good bit of body weight. And of course, when you're dieting, I find a lot of lads are like, I'm going to be busy right now, so I'm not going to diet. I think that's the most bullshit excuse I've ever seen, is that I'm busy, so I'm not going to diet. I found because I was busy, I was craving routine and craving a diet, because when I diet, my energy levels get better, my productivity gets better, my skin gets clearer, my sleep actually gets better. I feel more in control, I feel more locked into what I'm doing. That always happens whenever I diet. And I find that because I'm busy, I'm less likely to eat, because how can you eat when you're super busy all the time? So I thought it was the best thing possible for me. At this point, I was working 60-hour weeks, probably even more than that. You got to add training on top of that as well. If you think about it, I was probably spending more than half of my entire life either working or training, and obviously a lot of it sleeping other than that. But I was very committed to what I was doing. I was working kind of 40 hours per week at Bannatyne at times. I was working, God knows, 20, 30, 40 hours on my online coaching, to study, to teach clients, to put content out there, to do marketing. People don't see to an online coach the amount of things that you need to do, especially when you're doing online coaching and you're a PT, or you're doing online coaching and you're in something else as well. It's extremely tough because you have so many different hats that you have to wear. You have to do sales calls, you have to do so many different things. And I was extremely burnt out at this point because I was wearing so many hats. And I'm not going to lie, business wasn't going forwards that much. I went from January up to May, which was my birthday and my photo shoot. So my 23rd birthday at that point. All that I realistically did for that time was work, gym, and train. And my business didn't go forwards that much. I went from 10 clients up to about 12, 13 clients, but it was very up and down. The one thing I would say, though, is the results got significantly better within my coaching at that point, because I was personally locked in. My clients saw me on mission. My clients saw me getting in fantastic shape. I went from 78.5 kilos when I started in January 23 up to my photo shoot in May 23. I was down at 63 kilos. So I lost over 15 kilos, which is over 33, 34 pounds in the space of 4 months. I think that's pretty fucking sick, to be honest. You considering I was teaching spin classes, like, I visibly remember that I would wake up at 5 in the morning, get to the gym, open the gym. I would get straight ready, have a coffee, fasted, starving. I'd teach a spin class for 45 minutes. I almost felt like I was going to pass out while I was teaching the spin class, teaching it to 20 people. I'd then go and have my prepped meal. I'd then be on gym floor until kind of 4 in the afternoon, for example, or I'd work until 2 and then have some clients after that point as well. I'd then go home. I would study until kind of 7, 8 p.m. I'd have my meal and I'd be watching bodybuilding on YouTube. And that was kind of my entire life being hungry for 4 to 5 months. So a lot of dedication and sacrifice went in to get to that point. And there was a big moment for me. So in kind of April 2023, I remember having all of my money stolen from my bank account. I'm not going to go into the logistics of it, but it was a very dark time for me. I'd just saved a certain amount of money, and essentially I'd had my bank account hacked into, and I had all of the money from my bank account stolen, and I was basically broke. I had nothing. All I had realistically was kind of my family, my clients, obviously my car and my job as well. But all the stuff that I'd worked for had been stolen from me, and it was a very tough time for me mentally. And I had my photo shoot in 4 weeks, but I had to be all right. Now, something now is that I have to be okay. And people don't see this about coaches. You can be having these dreadful weeks. You can be having a bad day. You can have stuff going on in your life, but people don't see behind the person. We can show up and be happy, but we're not always happy deep down, because for that couple of weeks, it was a very dark time for me. I actually questioned if I could afford to do the photo shoot and afford to do certain things. I had a trip to Barcelona booked in a couple of weeks, but we made it happen. I borrowed money. I managed to do the photo shoot. I got in the shape of my life. And when I did the photo shoot, I was in the best condition I've ever seen myself in. I've always had a lot of body dysmorphia. I know a lot of lads watching this have body dysmorphia, but I've always had a ton of body dysmorphia in my life. And that photo shoot was the first time I looked back at a photo. I remember looking at it with George and Ben Mark, who was the camera guy, and we looked at it, and I looked at it and I thought, Matt, you're actually like looking pretty good on them photos. That was the first time that I'd ever seen that, and the amount of delight that brought me. Actually got a video of me walking out of there, a little selfie video of me just actually like being absolutely buzzing. I'm beaming ear to ear because I'm just like I put 4 or 5 months into here of sacrifice, because it was very low moments through that prep, and then to get there and just feel like, oh my god, everything's been achieved. I'm finally happy with how I'm looking and feeling, and everything's coming together. We'd had a couple of clients join us that week. Things were moving forwards. And then, yeah, after that point, I decided to leave the gym in September 2023 when my business went up. I'm not going to speak about that too much on this one, but I wanted to speak to you today about a lot of the things that I faced within my career, because the thing is my clients, I have to coach them around, right, your career's here. Here's how you get in shape on the side. And that's what I'm really passionate about helping people with. People say to me, Matt, you're already 25. How do you have so much experience? But I've been through so many different careers. I was an accountant when I was 18. I was a PT when I was 20. I lost my job when I was 20. I went back into PT at 21. I did multiple years of PT. I built an online business as well. So it's like I've been doing this for 9 years now. I got into the working world when I was 16, and I've been doing it for a long time now. So I know I can help driven guys that want to work on their career who are 25, 30, 35, 40. We've even helped guys in their 40s beforehand and given them advice to go and change their life with their business, their family, because it's the same for everyone. We teach guys how, right, okay, cool, here's what you're struggling with your life. Here's your big problem. That's what I'll always say is you need to find the big opportunity, the big problem in your life, and attack it with as much effort as possible. And that's what George allowed me to do, was focus on the bigger picture. And he just said to me, look, Matt, your business isn't going to grow that much at the minute, but just focus on your clients, get them incredible results, and then things are going to grow off the back of that. And we can see within the space of September 22, when I finally made the decision to start my online coaching, I said I want 10 clients. 1 year later, I actually decided to leave the gym floor and go completely online and go full time with it. So that is my story over the course of 2020 to 2023. Very up and down years of my life, but genuinely some of the best years of my life when I look back at it. And people can often get obsessed with, getting to the mountaintop, getting to the peak of your career, whatever it is. But what we need to understand, guys, is everything will end up owning you. You can want a wife, you can want a house, but the house will own you, the wife will own you in the future. So just enjoy your journey, because I look at it now and I'm very happy with my life. I love my life, but I had some great moments in 2020 to 2023. There's some very down moments, some up and down moments, and it's like scale weigh-ins. You're going to see scale weigh-ins, and it's like you get ups, you get downs, but take the medium. When you're on your journey, you get ups, you get downs. When you're high, don't get too high. When you're low, don't get too low. Just learn to enjoy your process, because we get obsessed with the mountaintop, but we don't enjoy the journey up to the mountaintop enough. So we're going to end the podcast there. I hope you guys enjoyed that one today, and we'll be dropping these on a weekly basis. I'm not going to drop one when I go to Budapest for a week, so it is Friday the 8th that week. I won't be dropping podcasts that week because I'm taking a week off work, but I'm going to continue giving you guys value on a weekly basis on YouTube. And if you haven't checked out our Instagram already, Instagram link is in the description. It's coachmatt.wilson. I post stories there daily, and I posts there daily. So if you'd like any more advice, even feel free to come reach out to me on Instagram. Spend a good bit of time on there. So if you ever want to have a chat about anything, feel free to reach out to me.